Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're just letting people into the space, and then we will be getting started in just a moment. We are so excited to have you all here with us this morning to hear this incredible data from our Gallup partners. All right. Good morning, everyone. As I mentioned, I think I was able to greet a few of you as you were coming into our virtual Zoom room and space. Good morning. My name is Nicole Ham. I am the Executive Director of Zones Project Jacksonville, and we are so excited to have you all here this morning as we begin to really understand our opportunities and the assets of our communities as we move forward in our work. So I'm just going to share my screen really quickly and just give a little bit of background on Zones Project Jacksonville. We're going to have our partners from Gallup then share some of the information that they have collected over the past couple of months. And then we will have an open Q&A towards the end. We will also have breaks in between the Gallup presentation for specific questions. And you will also notice that in the chat, if there is something immediate that you need to ask, there are questions that can go to the host and co-host on this call. If it's something like, can you just go remind me of what was just said, or I missed that, we're more than happy to answer those questions as we go through. But know that there will be dedicated breaks in between to ensure that you get the most comprehensive picture of the data collection that we have here. So I would like to start by just thanking and acknowledging our sponsors and partner organizations that are the reason that Zones Project Jacksonville is even why we're here today and allowed to come to life. So we are proudly supported by Baptist Health, Brooks Rehabilitation, the City of Jacksonville, Community First Credit Union, Florida Blue, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, Mayo Clinic, UF Health, and United Way of Northeast Florida. The mission and vision of Zones Project Jacksonville is to empower everyone everywhere to live better and longer. So we really want to create an environment and culture where the healthy choice is the easy choice. We want to ensure that communities, individuals, no matter where they live, that their needs are met in their immediate community, and that they are able to live free without disease and have a prosperous and purposeful life. There are 5 Blue Zones original hotspots, which is where our founder, Dan Buettner, discovered that there were 9 characteristics that aided in allowing some of these communities to live up to 100 years old. These are characteristics that we call the Power 9 that you'll see on your screen. And what Zones Project does is really create a holistic approach to well-being. We know it's not just diet, it's not just exercise, it's connectivity, it's belonging, it's having the right people around, it's about eating well. So what we really work to do is to create environments where all of these commonalities and characteristics are evident, unavoidable, and purposeful in their approach. So what we do know is that almost all Americans spend their lives within 20 miles of their home. I know for me, I think about where my nearest grocery store is, where my favorite restaurant is, where my neighborhood school that I grew up is. And so we know that where we live, work, play, and even pray have a significant outcome on our health and our well-being. And so what we really want to do is to activate those spaces within Jacksonville. And we know that no 2 neighborhoods are the same, and we absolutely acknowledge that. So we know that what those changes that we make in Durkeeville will look different from Sherwood. And we know that they'll look at a different in Audis versus Springfield. But what we do know is that when we can impact the neighborhood and where people are spending most of their time, we can move the needle forward on well-being. So Blue Zones Project Jacksonville is a community-wide project. We are a consolidated government and we have one district school system. So a lot of that policy and implementation is definitely going to be throughout all of Jacksonville. But what we do know is we're really looking at certain communities that have been historically underinvested and under-resourced, and we want to continue to make deep impact in those communities. So as you'll see that we are working in zip codes 32206, 32208, 32209, 32210, and 32244. Oftenly, you can think of this as the east side of Jacksonville, the northwest side, and the west side. So we are really specific about being intentional in these zip codes, but even beyond that, being intentional in the neighborhoods. We know that Springfield and Out East are in 32206, but they do not have the same neighborhood construct. So we really want to be intentional about the work that we're doing. And part of being intentional in that is making sure that we have the data and a baseline to move forward. So I am honored to recognize our partners on this call from Gallup that will be taking us through a deep dive of this data and helping us understand our opportunities and our assets here. And so I'd like to take a moment to just briefly introduce those from Gallup on this call that will be taking us through this. First, we have Micheline. Micheline is a senior consultant and account leader in Gallup's public sector division. She leads many of Gallup's high-profile education and well-being projects and is proficient at managing complex projects and fostering strong communication. At Gallup, she has led the public release of timely education research, looking at the barriers and opportunities to increasing higher education for U.S. adults, particularly among Black and Latino adults. Next, we have Dan Foy. Dan Foy is a leader in Gallup's public sector division, where he focuses on fostering partnerships to advance the science of well-being. He is responsible for building and overseeing client relationships, creating opportunities for collaboration with external innovators, and leading internal teams. He focuses on reporting of public health priorities, the assessment and activation of well-being sciences across community, and workplace development efforts with federal agencies and top-tier nonprofit healthcare systems. We also have Dan Withers with us this morning. Dan Withers serves as research director of the Gallup National Health and Wellbeing Index. He frequently presents at major conferences and summits, and his insights for research regularly appear on Gallup.com and the national media. As a consultant and analyst for Gallup, Dan has used his expertise in survey design, methodology, analysis, business outcomes modeling, report writing, and presenting results to help leaders better understand company marketplaces, customers, and employees. Dan's extensive experience and understanding of customer and employee research has earned him high distinction awards throughout his career. We are so excited to have these leaders from Gallup with us today to take us through this information, and I will now pass it over to Dan Withers to take us through our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Hello, everybody. It's great to have you here today. Really excited to share these results with you. I am going to share my screen. Nicole, I'm getting a pop-up that reads host disabled participant screen sharing. Yeah, sorry everybody, I got kicked out. I got kicked completely out and had to come back in. So I don't think I'm in the presenter
no problem. Room. You should be good to go.
Okay, thanks. There we go. Well, so over the next hour or so, I'll take you through these results. We have, as noted, we do have time set aside for questions kind of throughout. So you don't have to wait till the very end. If you see something that you don't get or wondering about, you'll have the opportunity to do so. The basic agenda for today, or what I'll go through, is I'll give you a little bit of a background on the Wellbeing Index itself, the development of this instrument. We're very proud of it, and kind of where that came from. Then I'll move you into the methodology and stability of results and the top line findings. We'll pause at that point for any questions up until there. Then I'm going to move into the so-called evidence-based improvement metrics. These are kind of the real scoreboard items that Blue Zones project communities around the country have historically focused on. It's about 20 different metrics. Then I'll go ahead and lay out kind of all the rest of what's in the well-being index, because there's good and useful information in there that's not a part of the EBI metrics. We do have custom questions. We have 7 of them. That kind of gives us some extra granularity as the lay of the land in terms of how people are living their lives inside of Duval County. And then finally, I'll leave off with a few final thoughts, and then more question opportunities there at the end. The well-being index, we conceptualize well-being being anchored around what Gallup calls the 5 essential elements. So the large majority of the questions that are in the survey instrument itself are going to map to one of these 5. There are a few that are more outcomes based that are kind of held to the side, but most is going to go to these 5. Career well-being, which was previously known as purpose, before that is career. It's toggled back and forth in its naming conventions over the years, is liking what you do each day, having the right career in life for you. So whether you are a worker or a retiree or a student or a stay-at-home parent or house manager, are you a good natural fit for what you do? Are you using your strengths? Are you learning and growing? Are you setting and reaching goals? That's what we mean by career well-being. So not just for workers, it's your career in life. Social well-being is the love that you have in your life, obviously very important. Getting positive energy from family and friends, having someone in your life who's looking out for your well-being. Financial well-being isn't about income, although income certainly helps with financial well-being, but it's really about how you manage your wealth and live within your means to build financial security. Community well-being is the emotional attachment that you have to the area where you live. So are you proud of it? Do you feel safe walking around in it? Do you give back to it in impactful ways? And then physical well-being. Physical well-being will ask questions about sheer physical health, disease burden. We'll get height and weight, so we'll have self-report BMI weight classes on the back end of that. We certainly do have emotional and mental health metrics as well. Those are assimilated inside of our physical element, and some other subjective well-being metrics. So I'll come back to all that in greater detail when I show you the results, but that's the basic structure of the well-being index. All 5 of these elements statistically earn their place at the table. And holistic well-being, as defined by having high well-being across all of them, is always going to yield better outcomes, whether it's an individual or it's a work group or it's a community or it's a state or it's a country. When you've got all 5, you're better off than having any 2 or 3 or 4 or 1. The Wellbeing Index itself was developed in 2007 and launched January of 2008, originally known as the Gallup Healthways Wellbeing Index. Gallup had massive amounts of data from international measurement in topics of well-being going back decades that we leveraged. We also made use very heavily, leaning on world experts on the topic, including Danny Kahneman, Angus Deaton, a couple of Nobel laureates, the late great Ed Diener, Arthur Stone, Joe Copeland, MIT Age Lab, Jim Verchaska, and others all helped formulate our conceptualization of what well-being is and what the world knows about well-being. Based upon their advice, we then did a whole lot of statistical modeling on over 300 different survey metrics and kind of boiled it down to what ended up being the final answer. To date, over 3 million American adults have been surveyed one way or another by this instrument. Gallup's been involved with the Blue Zones Project going way back. The Beach Cities was kind of the very first one in 2010. That's South LA County, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, and Hermosa Beach. I was there at the very first press conference with Dan Buettner and some others. It was a lot of fun. Since then, we have administered over 150 standalone well-being index surveys in Blue Zones Project communities across many states from coast to coast. Methodology. So this is address-based sampling. So we mailed out hard copy surveys to our target population. We did provide a web option. About a fifth went through web. The surveys come with a $1 incentive, just a dollar slipped into the envelope. And so that's kind of all you need to kind of help juice your response rate. As a point of clarification, this is just Jacksonville proper. That's about 950,000 people. This is not the broader metropolitan statistical area. That goes up to about 1.6 million. So it's roughly 650,000 more people out in the suburbs and the exurbs that are not included here. Jacksonville's MSA historically has had pretty fair well-being. In our last release back in 2019, Jacksonville was ranked 48th out of 156 reportable MSAs nationwide. Just zeroing in on those 52 or so that are in the million plus club, Jacksonville was ranked 16th. But this is not that. Our focus here on some areas that really need a boost in their well-being, and that takes us to the focused zip codes. We've got East Jacks, we've got North Side, and we've got West Side. Just 5 different zip codes are servicing those 3 areas. We also then have the rest of Jacksonville. Overall, we wound up with close to 3,000 completes. That was our target. We mailed out over 30,000 total surveys, final response rate of 10.6%. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for this kind of population. You get into real hardcore urban areas, you don't expect as good a response rate as you get from a standalone one-horse town in Iowa with 30,000 people. Then we routinely will get 25% or better in our response rates. But 10.6% is perfectly reasonable. We get perfectly normal response distributions. Of course, all of the data are going to be weighted based on Nielsen demographic statistics, so that will correct for the imperfectness or the randomness of the sample. So folks from groups that are underrepresented compared to what we would expect in a perfectly random sample will count as a little more than one person, and then respondents from groups that are overrepresented compared to what we would expect will count as a little less than one person. And then here's the stability result. So that first column there on the left is your final end counts. And obviously, North Side, West Side, and East Jacks is a small piece of the population. We are disproportionately sampling for those areas because they're the ones that we have quite keen interest in focusing. And we've got nice sample sizes, very stable results, very good margins of error, as you can see. Then you got the remainder of Jacksonville. One last point with the Jacksonville overall, we do have a Jacksonville total, which is the whole team, all 2,900 records. In addition to creating weighting targets to correct for demographic differences from what we would expect, obviously the Jacksonville total is also correcting for the disproportionate sampling. So North Side, West Side, and East Jacks have most of the completed interviews, but they only count as much as there are people in those areas compared to the broader city. And finally, you'll notice on the far right for the well-being index and the element scores themselves, those are not proportions. They're not percentages. They're all on a 0 to 100 index scale. They are means. And so that margin of error is a lot tighter around those numbers. So resist the temptation to think of them as percentages. They're index scores, and they're typically around plus or minus 1 to 1.5 points. All right. I'm just going to pause right there. Any questions about anything you've seen so far regarding the background, development, and methodology? All good so far? All right. Here's kind of a quick one-pager on our main findings. The well-being index score and all 5 element scores for our 3 focused communities are low, with the exception of career. Career is a happy exception to that. I'll come back to more in a little bit. They'd all be near the bottom of the rankings in our most recent MSA database. The financial well-being and community well-being are particularly low. Awareness of the Blue Zones Project, kind of here right out of the gate, is in the mid-single digits. That's in line with what we typically see with baseline. Favorability is good. This is only asked among those who've heard of the Blue Zones Project, but it's you've got a nice ratio of favorable to unfavorable, about 5 to 1. Again, it's very early. As this process matures and people get to know you a little bit better, we'll have clear reads on awareness and favorability. But awareness in particular, we're going to want to see go up steadily in the years ahead. Desire to live and age in the community slightly outweighs desire to leave, so it's not particularly high. 1/4 of residents do report volunteerism in the prior 6 months. That part's pretty good. However, safety is a major deterrent to walking and biking for non-recreational reasons. Sleep problems are common for about 1/3 of residents. Blue Zones Project doesn't have any specific interventions as it pertains to sleep, but sleep is always there. It's always important, and that's something that will be a part of messaging. Okay, here are your high-level index scores, and I'll just be systematic in this. That top row is the overall well-being index itself. U.S. total 61.2. East Jacks, North Side, and West Side, all south of 58. So they're pretty low. That's gonna put all of them down near the bottom of that database ranking. If you plug them in, that's where we'd find them. Rest of Jacksonville is pretty good for an overall Jacksonville total of 58.7. Again, when you get to the broader metropolitan area, then you have a much better. It was 62.5, I think, in our last measurement, but that's not what we're looking at here. We're focusing on areas that we think we can really help. With the career well-being, and that orange shading, folks, that just means it's statistically significantly worse than the U.S. total. So if you see the orange with high levels of certainty, it's lower than what we find nationally. If you see some blue shading, and you will, then that's going to be statistically significantly better. When you get to the career well-being, it's much more in line with national levels. Northside just missed getting the blue ink. The other ones squarely inside the margins of what we find nationally. That's great news and will be a great foundation to build upon. With social well-being, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Northside and the rest of Jacksonville managed to get inside of the margins, and so we call them a statistical draw. With the other areas, though, it's lower. And then financial well-being is quite low across the board. Inside of kind of our 3 main communities, low 50s in the index score compared to 62.8 nationally. Gets better with the rest of Jacksonville, but still below the U.S. Physical well-being too. There's going to be it's going to be a target-rich environment with improving physical wellness, emotional and mental health, but not as bad as what you find with the financial and the community well-being. Communities also pretty low. That's the attachment I feel to my area, feeling that the housing is ideal for me and my family, feeling safe within it, etc. Okay, I know this is a bit of an eye chart. Just hang with me. I'll be systematic and walk you through it. This is the first of a couple of slides now looking at the evidence-based improvement metrics, those big scoreboard items that we're going to have kind of most keenly tracked over time. Across the very top is life evaluation, and that's using our very first two questions of the survey that don't map to any particular element, but that's the Hadley Cantrell ladder. Imagine a ladder with 10 rungs. Top rung is your best possible life. Bottom rung is your worst possible life. Where do you place yourself on that ladder today? And where do you think you'll be 5 years from now? So current life satisfaction and anticipated life satisfaction. And then we'll proportionalize it. If you're a 7 or higher on current ladder and an 8 or higher with future ladder, we classify you as thriving. The U.S. population typically sits in the low to mid 50s that are in that thriving category. East Jax is actually inside the margins there, as is the rest of Jacksonville. A little bit lower for North Side and West Side in the mid 40s. But overall, the general evaluation of our lives isn't that far off from what we find across the U.S. Those next four, then, and kind of that beige shading, those are all career metrics, and there's some real good ones in here. Really important one is leader in life creates enthusiasm for the future. Leaders are a hugely important vanguard of high well-being workplaces and high well-being places. And North Side and West Side are both statistically significantly better than what we find nationally. East Jax in line, as is the rest of Jacksonville, but there's a good foundation there that we can draw upon. Setting and reaching goals is lower, but then you get into using your strengths, your natural strengths on a daily basis, and much higher. East Jax and North Side get the blue shading, statistically better. And then learning or doing something interesting every day. And that's one of my kind of favorite bell cow metrics when it comes to the well-being index. Very common feature of high well-being persons and high well-being places. Cities that are intellectually lively, intellectually curious, have interesting things to do, tend to be higher well-being cities nationally. And East Jax, West Side, both comparing favorably with the U.S. North Side statistically better than the U.S. So I think that's all encouraging. When you get into the two social well-being metrics, you kind of have two different things going on here. The friends and family giving you positive energy every day, that comes from a prolonged, enduring relationship with the people that matter most to you. With someone in your life encourages you to be healthy, that's more of the buddy system, having an accountability partner. Obviously, it spills over into other aspects of well-being, notably physical health. Someone encourages you to be healthy, pretty good. And that's another important strength in the area that we can leverage moving forward. I'll come back to that at the end. North Side just missed getting the blue shading there, but the other one lower. And so you kind of get a little mixture inside of the social well-being metrics. The community well-being, now it's more negative, as we noted. City or area where you live is perfect for you. 53% of American adults agree with that statement. You're way back in the 30s inside of our three focused communities. Rest of Jacksonville up in the mid 40s, not as bad, but still statistically worse. Proud of community, about half of American adults agree. This is all on a 5-point agreement scale, so these are 4s and 5s. They agree that they're proud of their community, lower though inside of our areas by pretty wide margins. And then feeling safe and secure That's now flipping the scale and showing you the percent that disagree that they feel safe or secure in their area. About 12% of American adults nationally disagree that they feel safe and secure in their community. Jumps up much higher, of course, in East Jackson, North Side, and West Side. That's a reflection of the socioeconomic realities of those areas. Better than the rest of Jacksonville and the out sitting around 17%, but still higher than the national total. One kind of good one though that I like, and this is not that uncommon, is that this is impactful volunteerism. I've received recognition for helping to improve the city or area where I live in the last 12 months. The Jacksonville is in line with that or better than that, than what we find nationally. It's a tough nut to crack by design. Only about 11% of American adults will agree with that statement. Not just volunteerism, but impactful volunteerism. But you're up in the mid-teens in East Jackson, North Side. So there is a willingness to be out in the community and doing things to try and make the community better that we don't find customarily in other areas. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. That was kind of a quick data dump. There's going to be another round of data dump coming. Do you have any questions, anyone, about the results that you've seen so far? And I'll go ahead and back up to this slide. All good?
You can also feel free to add your questions to the chat and we'll be answering them as we move along as well.
All right. Okay. Part 2 of the evidence-based improvement metrics. Now we're focusing more on physical well-being. Our obesity percentage nationally is around 33%. This is self-report. We do not handicap for the self-report nature of it. That's the vanity effect that does exist. Were we to handicap for that, CDC has done that. We're on the back end of BRFSS or other health surveys. They'll have people will show up at the door randomly and get folks on the scale. And what the CDC has found is that if you try and handicap for that, it's about a fifth higher. So if you're a population that's 33% obese, you're in reality, you're going to be up closer to about 40%. Now, what we're showing you here is just straight up. We're not attempting to do that, but with self-report, obesity is high in East Jackson, West Side. It's really high in North Side, staring down 50% obese. Rest of Jacksonville and Jacksonville total, close to 40%. So it's no joke. Obesity is very high in these areas. Obesity plus overweight is another one we like to look at. That one's not quite so bad. We're up in the 70s. That's something that is going to be manageable as we'll look to bring those numbers down. I think that the main issues are more about obesity than it is about above normal weight. Smoking rates are pretty high, nationally hovering around 12%. Of course, that's come down steadily over the last 50 years as a function of health literacy and public policy. But it's still awful high. East Jack's about 1 out of 4 report that they're smokers, roughly 1 out of 5 in North Side, and then West Side at about 17%. Rest of Jacksonville at 12%. So when you get outside of these 3 areas, the smoking rate's about what we find nationally. But when you include them, you can you see that it's much higher. Now the good news is Blue Zones Project historically has a very good track record of reducing the smoking rate. Smoking cessation is a good one. That kind of comes as sort of a part of the general intervention. So we'll hope to see that reproduced here. How many days in the last week have you exercised at least 30 minutes? Okay, we proportionalize this as the percentage of respondents that report that they've exercised at least 3 days in the last week, 30 minutes or more per day. Low 50s nationally. North Side and West Side, rest of Jacksonville are all inside the margins with what we find nationally. Only East Jacks is a little bit lower, but exercise, not a huge issue. And same with produce consumption. That's in line with what we find nationally. Same kind of thing. How many days in the last week have you had at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables? Northside at 57%, again, just missed getting the orange shading. That's statistically significant, 95% certainty. It would be significant if we lowered the bar just a little bit to 90% confidence. But otherwise, again, produce consumption, not bad. But then you get into kind of some of those chronic conditions. Do you currently have, or are you currently being treated for high blood pressure? That's in the high 20s nationally, much higher inside of our focal areas. Northside at 50%. That's a reflection of that very high obesity level, as it is for the rest of them. Do you currently have, or are you currently being treated for high cholesterol? Mid to upper 20s. Feeling active and productive every day in the last 7 days. It's just on a 5-point agreement scale. It's more subjectively designed question. Not too bad in Northside and the rest of Jacksonville, a little bit lower in East Jackson, West Side, but then feeling good about physical appearance. The physical health is not particularly good for folks in these areas. Be that as it may, there is kind of I'm not going to worry about convention so much. I feel comfortable in my own skin and who I am. So in Northside, where half of people are obese, you also have over half that report they feel good about their physical appearance. Couple more slides, and then I'll be done with the eye charts. Here's the rest of disease burden and chronic conditions. These top 4 there: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, depression. Those are all lifetime retrospectives. Has a doctor or nurse ever told you that you have blank? Just rounding off now to whole percentages, we're about 35% nationally, much higher inside of our focal areas, especially Northside and East Jacks. High cholesterol, again, not so bad. That lifetime retrospective for East Jackson, West Side is inside the margins, what we find nationally. Northside, though, is still higher. The diabetes rate, though, is higher, all the way up to 1 out of 4 in Northside, 21% in East Jacks, and 1 out of 5 in West Side. So that's a pretty healthy diabetes rate. Depression is on the high end. That's not the major issue as far as physical and mental health, but you do have 20% in East Jackson, West Side that are currently have or being treated for depression, and over lifetime about 3 out of 10. Cancer rates in line with national normative data. So you've got about 7% of folks walking around that have had cancer at some point in their lifetime, and about 2 out of every 100 that are currently being treated for cancer in the area. That, again, is in line with national numbers. Heart attack rates in Northside is about double what we find nationally, and outside the margins, again, that's a reflection of the obesity and the other associated chronic conditions. And then I put in health insurance rate, 10% of American adults without health insurance. That did come down fairly significantly during the Obama era in the wake of the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And it's, only East Jacks sitting at 13.5% reports of no health insurance is higher than national numbers. General health. This is the BRFSS question. Overall, would you say that your health is excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? That's actually not a scored metric of the well-being index, but we like to ask it. It's the 3rd question of the survey, right after our 2 latter questions, and it comes in handy to get a sense on what people think of their health, their physical health generally. It's been well established that it's a very good predictor of age-adjusted mortality rates, just that single question. And what you're seeing across the top row are the percent of folks who are saying excellent or very good, quite a bit lower than national total. And then the percent on the other end of the spectrum, my health is only fair or poor, 16% nationally, close to double that inside of our focal point areas. Stress, stress can be kind of a tricky one. It's not desirable, but sometimes you can find higher stress in high well-being areas and lower stress in lower well-being areas. Right now, East Jackson, Northside, their stress levels are in line with what we find nationally. Westside a little bit higher, but this is daily affect. It's the day reconstruction method. We don't ask people how stressed they are or if they're stressed. We ask them, did you experience a lot of stress yesterday? So we bypass memory and recall and just talk about our most recent experience. It's a good way to do it. And it's not a big issue inside of our areas. Dentistry, oral health is often forgotten part of well-being, very important part of well-being. Only about 2/3 of American adults have been to the dentist in the last 12 months. That's down to just 48% in East Jackson, Northside. And then the rest of Jacksonville is still just hovering in the mid to upper 50s. So that's a bit of a missed opportunity that we'll hope to see improve. Good oral health, setting aside periodontal disease, which you don't want to get. Poor oral health is linked to all kinds of nasty physical health elements downstream. But also when you control for major demographics in the background, your education level, how old you are, how rich you are, etc. People that get to the dentist think about and evaluate their lives better than those who don't. It's a good psychological trigger for a life well lived. Taking care of my mouth, I'm taking care of my life. And so that's a sneaky one, but a really important one. A lot of room for improvement there. Satisfied with standard of living is low. That's in line with what we expect based on the financial well-being index scores. The food insecurity is also pretty high. Unable to buy food at least one time in the last 12 months. So not chronically hungry, but there's been one time in the last 12 months at least where I haven't had the money to pay for food. And that hovers around 17% nationally. But you're up, 38, 41, 30% in our focal areas. Rest of Jacksonville, not quite as bad, but there's a lot of that going on. A lot of people are experiencing that issue, and that comes with poor financial well-being. Ate healthy all day the previous day, below average. Felt physical pain a lot of the day yesterday. Nationally at 28%, much higher. In our focused areas, again, that's a direct link to the high obesity levels. And then how many days in the last month has poor health prevented me from doing normal activities? It's a good one that links to things like unplanned absenteeism from work, among other metrics. Nationally, the mean is about 2.8 poor health days, and it's double that almost across our focused areas. Last slide, and we'll take another break for any questions. Just a few more. An important career metric. You like what you do every day. That's having a natural right fit to your career in life. And that's good. Overall in line, Northside a little bit lower than the national average, low enough that it gets the orange shading, but the rest of them are in line. So as with the other career aspects, career well-being is holding up pretty well here. Relationship with spouse, partner, or closest friend is stronger than ever. That's obviously social well-being. It's lower. About 65% of American adults agree with that statement. Only 1 out of 2 inside of the areas that we're focused on. Always making time for trips or vacations with family or friends. Poor financial well-being can create a drag to that, but we have a lot of lower financial well-being communities that nevertheless do workarounds. You just go to the local park You don't have to go on an expensive trip. Inside of our areas, we're for the most part in line with what we find nationally. A couple more financial well-being metrics: having enough money to do everything that you want to do, not worried about money in the last 7 days. Lower as expected based on what we've seen so far. A mental and emotional health metric: having little interest or pleasure in doing things over the last 2 weeks. This is the percent not at all. So higher is better. 55% of American adults have not had any issues with having little interest or pleasure in doing things over the last few weeks. That's lower though inside of our focal areas. And then finally, physical health near perfect. You know, again, there's North Side again. Remember, we had the feels good about your physical appearance was strikingly high considering the obesity level and the disease burden that those folks are carrying around. Same thing with their assessment of physical health is near perfect. It's in line with national averages. So that indicates that there's some health literacy work to be done. They help people kind of reconfigure and reconceptualize what they think it means to be healthy and to live a life well lived. All right. One more stopping point. Any questions so far about any of these results slides?
Dan, we have a lot of great questions in the chat. So the first
Super.
question is it common to see normal levels of eating produce and exercise while at the same time seeing high blood pressure, cholesterol, obesity, overweight, and other well-being index community surveys?
That's a great question. Produce consumption, you know, that one is not as related to obesity and the various chronic conditions as you might guess. The better predictor of that comes from third from the bottom here: ate healthy all day before. Did you eat? This is just a yes, no question. Did you eat healthy all day yesterday or all day yesterday? Feels subjective. It is subjective. Different people can have different ideas of what it means to eat healthy. But that question does great work inside of our models. It carries a lot of heavy lifting inside of our models because most people have a pretty good idea about what it means. That one's going to come closer to what you find with the obesity than the produce consumption. We find that folks that are obese are just about as likely to be good produce eaters as those who are not obese. Obviously, you can get into things like the food deserts, generally in lower income areas where people are going to be defaulting to the fast food because they can eat more food less expensively and it's not as good for them. You do have that going on, but produce consumption, no, that's not particularly incongruent in my experience with what we see with the obesity and the above normal weight.
Great, thank you, Dan. We also have a couple more. Is there any data on how many people can't afford healthcare? I wonder how under insurance rates compare nationally.
Yeah, well, so that's that bottom row there. Nationally, 10% of U.S. adults are reporting an absence of health insurance. Yet those estimates are going to vary a little bit depending on how you frame it. When the government sets about to measure these things, they'll really narrowly define: do you have health? Have you had health insurance even one day in the last 12 months? That kind of stuff. With us, we just simply ask, do you have health insurance? Yes or no. And 10% say no nationally. With EastJax, 13.5%. That's the only one that's statistically significantly higher than the U.S. And if you kind of toggle over to the right, the rest of Jacksonville and the Jacksonville total, those, you know, just the rest of Jacksonville just missed getting the blue shading for being statistically significantly lower. So health insurance is absolutely related to well-being. It's absolutely related to physical health for obvious reasons, but it's not a big issue here compared to some of the other things that we're looking at.
Great. And then we have another question. I may have missed it. I remember seeing the statistics which illustrated the overall numbers and the percentage of people who participated in the survey, but do we have those total sliced by each of the 3 community samples?
Yes, yeah, and that's. Micheline, sorry, was the question about the response rate or just the total sample size?
The total sample size, excuse me, for each of the specific zip codes.
Sure. So that's, so the overall response rate is 10.5%. That's across all of it. I don't have at my fingertips response rates for each one of our subpopulations, but that second column right there gives you your final end count. So those are your sample sizes, 2,974 total. We have an N of 627 respondents from north side, 783 from west side, 696 from East Jacks, and then 868 from the remainder of Jacksonville.
Okay.
So nice, good sample size, very stable results.
Excellent. All right, great. Those are all the questions in the chat. But if anyone has any other questions, we can maybe take another one or two more.
Micheline, I have one. There's a question. Was there anything in the age of respondents or gender that was significant?
Sure. Those patterns look a lot like what we see nationally, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit more when we move into the custom questions. Well-being, it gets better as you get older. Well-being is never better than it is when you get to 65 plus. Now, physical health starts to become an issue because the probability that you'll be suffering from certain chronic conditions or other disease states is never higher than when you're a senior. On the other hand, eating habits never better, smoking never lower, etc. Social well-being now is off the charts. I've got very good happiness in my life. Low stress and worry in my life. Daily affect is all a lot better when you're older. Same holds true with things like education and income. Higher education and higher income are both good for well-being for fairly obvious reasons. And that's absolutely in line with what we see inside of Jacksonville. So overall, it's lower, but that range in well-being across kind of some of these typical subgroups that we look at, that's right in line with what we find. So if we kind of look at those, say, higher income folks inside of these focal areas, they have considerably better well-being than their lower income counterparts. One final point, though, talking about these demographic distinctions, is that yes, socioeconomic status influences well-being. But point number one is, even if I got an advanced degree and I make good cash in my career, that doesn't mean that I don't have a lot of room to improve in my well-being. And the second point is that when we disintegrate results in our validation efforts, and look at how well-being influences subgroups, regardless of race or ethnicity, regardless of income, regardless of gender, regardless of education level. What we find is that high well-being people inside of each subgroup, inside of each level in each subgroup, outperform low well-being people. So this is all subjective well-being. That doesn't mean it's not scientifically validated. It's been robustly scientifically validated. And it's been done so across socioeconomic status. Good to move on, I think. Really good questions. All right, now I've got 7 custom questions to show you here, just 7 slides. Are you aware of the Blue Zones project in Jacksonville? Single digits, you'd expect it to be single digits here. This is right in line with what we get out of the gate in other Blue Zones project communities. You're really going to want to move this one forward, though. gang. Awareness is such a critical part of it. It isn't the awareness per se, it's the awareness that then increases the probability that folks are going to get engaged directly in Blue Zones project programs and initiatives. The more that you make that happen, the better the probabilities that the population as a whole is going to see their well-being numbers get better and go up. So you really have to pound the rock to get the name out there, get the brand out there, let people know what you're up to. Blue Zones Project is very good at this. It's had good success rates in a lot of communities nationwide over the last 13 years that I've been involved with this work. But that's your baseline, and we're going to be looking to see that improve pretty steadily. The favorability, these are small sample sizes now because these are only asked of that, the 4.9% of all of our respondents that said they're aware. So it's only 1 out of every 20. Favorability is high though, half are favorable. The unfavorable rate is lower. Don't be alarmed by that 26% in Northside. It's a pretty small sample size. Big margin of error around those numbers, but that's where we stand right now. And again, as you kind of get into it, we'll look to see these numbers shore up and get more stable over time. Should have mentioned back here with the awareness, no significant difference is found across any of the demographic groups with the awareness level. With favorability though, now folks under the age of 45, white, college graduates, higher annual household income are all the ones that are going to look upon this most favorably. Not more likely to be aware, but they are more likely to be glad to have you there, to be glad to see you. And that's typical, quite frankly. Desire to live and age in the community only slightly now outweighs the desire to leave. The exact question is, how much do you agree or disagree that you want to live and age in the community where you currently live? So this is a 5-point agreement scale. The strongly agree, just that top box percentage is shown there at the top row. And then you've got the top 2 box, strongly agree, added to somewhat agree. So any level of agreement, low 20s for strongly agree, low to mid 20s, kind of close to half with some level of agreement that they want to currently live and age in the community where they live. Disagreement levels are lower, but not a lot lower. You get to strongly disagree, about 15% across all of Jacksonville compared to 24% who strongly agree. So these are not off the charts, these percentages. One happy outcome of improved well-being is that you, and that's just kind of part of the Blue Zones Project paradigm, is that people are going to be more likely to want to stay put. They're attached to their community. They're proud of their community. They have ties to the community and they want to stay there. That's a common feature of blue zones, identified blue zones around the world, and it's something that we'll continue to track here. No significant differences found across the major demographic groups for this one. Okay, outside recreation. Weather permitting, in a typical week, how many days do you or members of your family spend at least 20 minutes using a local outside resource, such as a walking trail, sidewalk, park, or splash pad? The mean number of days is kind of in the low 2s. The percent who say none at all is a little over a third. The percent who say 4 or more is about 1 out of 4 across all of Jacksonville. You do find some discrepancies. College grads and those with higher annual household incomes are going to be more likely to report 4 or more days per week that they're getting out and spending at least 20 minutes outdoors recreationally. Here's volunteerism. Within the past 6 months, how many hours have you spent volunteering in the community or the area where you live? That top row just shows you the mean number of hours. East Jacks at 11.1, North Side 7.4, West Side 6.1. So it's lower in West Side than you find in East Jacks. But incidentally, we did we trimmed the tails a little bit, so real big outliers got removed from this to give us, so we don't have any major outliers that are playing around with our means. And you know, about 1 out of 4 report at least 1 out in the last 6 months. It is higher with college graduates, residents with higher annual income, more likely to report greater than 10 days of volunteerism, 10 hours of volunteerism. And then finally, safety, a major deterrent to walking or biking for non-recreational reasons. Here's the question, thinking about the safety of the area where you live. How much would an improvement in your area's safety increase your likelihood of walking or biking for non-recreational reasons? I think those are kind of eye-popping numbers. West Side, not awful, but still pretty high at 35%. The rest of Jacksonville sitting at 40%, pretty high. Then it's exceptionally high in East Jackson, North Side. Over half of respondents report a great deal is how much it would increase their likelihood. So safety is certainly a deterrent to doing some of these things we want people to be doing, being out, moving their body naturally, getting outdoors, biking around. Safety is getting in the way of that. You know, only 1 out of 5 across Jacksonville report not at all. Only 11% inside of North Side and 14% in East Jacks report not. As we might expect, a little bit better in those higher income households. In your neighborhood, how many people do you routinely say hello? And so that top row there in the shaded blue is your mean number of people. Folks in West Side a little bit less social than their counterparts in North Side and East Jacks, more likely to say hi to people. You have in East Jacks and North Side about 1 out of 5 say I routinely say hello to more than 10 people. West Side just 8%, rest of Jacks just 11%. So I think, you know, these numbers are actually higher than what we've seen nationally. This does get better with those age 65 and older. 21% are those of seniors are reporting greater than 10 folks that they routinely say hello to. Next one, this is an important one, available healthy food. Please tell me how typical it is to have healthy options available in each of the following places. Would you say that healthy options are available always, usually, occasionally, or never? Household Jacksonville total is at 79%. That's a little on the low side. Low to mid 80s from what we've seen elsewhere is more typical. In our focal point area, especially East Jacks, 73% lower. So getting healthy foods into the households, the room for improvement there. Skip down to the bottom row, my most visited restaurant. That one's lower too. Jacksonville total sitting at 68%. Typically we'll see that up in the 70s. You know, and again, when you get into our 3 areas, East Jacks, North Side, and West Side, all lower, you know, only about roughly 6 out of 10. The workplace is in line with what we've seen elsewhere. It's always going to be the lowest of the 3. So the employers in the area, of course, are going to get targeted. That's a really, really important part of improving the well-being of the people in the community, is by getting to them through their workplace. They're more of a captive audience there, but as workplaces wake up to the importance of nutrition in boosting well-being and then boosting the performance outcomes associated with high well-being, then you can start to see those numbers move. So workplace is an important one. It's in line with what we find nationally. or in other places where this has been measured, but still the lowest of the three. Residents with higher annual household incomes are going to be the most likely to report always or usually 91% inside of the household. And last one, how frequently do you have trouble sleeping? Would you say every day, most days, occasionally, rarely, or never? Again, Blue Zones Project does not have explicit interventions pertaining to this, but this is an important one to know about for our own edification. And you've got about a third that say every day or most days they're going to have trouble sleeping. That's pretty high. I think kind of when we sort of cross-check that with other sleep type variables that Gallup has measured over the years and in recent times, rarely or never, also a third. So you have about as many people, about a 1-to-1 ratio, about as many people that routinely have a hard time sleeping compared to those who rarely or never have a hard time sleeping. Residents with annual household income of under 48,000 are most likely to report every or most days. So that one's inversely related to income. Last slide, a few final thoughts, and then we'll open it back up to Q&A for anyone who has any questions. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I know this was a lot of intel, but I wanted we really wanted to be sure that you all have a good handle on where it is that we're currently sitting at our baseline measure. The first thought, pick a target. There are lots of opportunities for intervention throughout the focus zip codes and Jacksonville generally. Poor financial and community well-being does substantially lower the desire to live and age in the current community. The safety is a significant barrier to healthy life choices. Poor sleep, highly inversely related to good well-being, is a recurring issue for a third of the residents, as you just saw. But career well-being is an important bright spot, a really important one. And that makes this kind of an unusual profile. If I were going to start with one element and build around it, it would be career well-being. Career well-being is the strongest influencer of the other four elements. So if you just do a correlation matrix of the 5 elements crossed by the 5 elements, the number one driver of social, financial, community, and physical well-being is career. So it's a really good one to have in your corner. Career is already in a pretty good place, plenty of room for improvement, but as that gets better, it will have the effect of pulling the other ones up, including financial well-being. And there's a lot that you can draw upon there. Leadership driving future optimism is a really good one. Leadership gang is just incredibly important to any successful well-being intervention, be it in the workplace or be it inside of a community or a state. Having leaders that speak about this on an ongoing basis, flooding the zone with the message that this is who we are now, this is important to us, and this is never going to go away. We're now all about well-being around here. That is a real common characteristic. If you don't have that, you're going to have a hard time getting the thing off the ground. The good news is that there's already a pretty strong sentiment around leadership driving future optimism. So we can leverage that as we weave well-being into the messaging. Personal strength usage is another one. Using strengths, pretty decent across most of our measured areas. There are many great strategies for learning what your personal strengths are, and then using those personal strengths to drive well-being. And again, we've already got a pretty good self-concept of what our strengths are. That gives you a really good place to boost off from. The other one, don't forget, this is back to social well-being. Don't forget about the accountability part. That's another one of those real important bell cow metrics. Commonly found in high well-being persons and places. That's already in pretty good shape here. room for improvement. But the beautiful part about the buddy system is that you can kind of cross-pollinate inside of your interventions. So a lot of people already have at least one accountability partner. As you start getting them aware of and involved with Blue Zones Project programs and offerings, have people invite their buddy to come with them or their buddies to come with them. You can quickly, exponentially grow involvement in what we're up to by leveraging previously existing accountability infrastructure, and you have that in pretty good place here. So there's look, when we went into this, given the areas that we're focusing on, we weren't expecting to find high well-being, and we didn't. But we have found, I think, some very encouraging things that can really help move the needle. I'll make one final comment, and we can open it back up to any questions. Is that while an imperfect model, Fort Worth is a pretty good model. Fort Worth started their Blue Zones Project journey back in 2014. At that time, we had a database of 190 MSAs, and against that database, they were the equivalent of 185th in their ranking. At 58.8 was their well-being index score, not much better than what we find in our 3 focus communities. Oh, in the ensuing years, they've had steady improvement. In the most recent time that we were in there in 2020, they were at 62.4 in the well-being index score. Really nice improvement. That the equivalent ranking against a little bit smaller database, 156 MSAs, put them at 35th. That's how far Fort Worth has come. Jacksonville can do that too. It's just it's commitment. It's talking about it. It's flooding the zone with messaging. It's getting people aware of Blue Zones Project. It's getting people involved with Blue Zones Project offerings, and then you will see that needle move. But that final point, just to dovetail with driving that awareness and driving that engagement, is you do kind of find tipping points. We're not just measuring people who are turned on by the Blue Zones Project and actively involved in it. We're measuring everybody, and you kind of have to hit a critical mass of people that are on board to really give yourself a fighting chance at moving the needle for the entire population. We know that those who are actively involved have high well-being, and their well-being improves faster over time. But if you want the whole population to get better as a team, you've really got to pound the rock on those points. So that's the last of my slides. Happy to answer any more good questions from you.
Great. Thank you, Dan, for that great presentation. We have a few questions here in the Q&A that we were able to answer, but it would be good to get your insight as well. One of them comes from Kay. Can you further explain the leadership in career question? Is this their boss?
Good question. It can be. By design, we do not define it. The question was studied and experimented upon with that kind of open-endedness embedded inside of it, and has been validated with that kind of open-endedness. So we need not, nor should we not, try and get too prescriptive in how people ought to think about it. If you're in the formal workforce, leadership is always going to include your organization. Not restricted to it necessarily, but that's going to be a big part of it. A lot of us, of course, are outside of the workforce. Then what else can leadership be? Oh, it can be political leadership. It can be community leadership. It can be clergy. It can be leadership inside of the family, a matriarch or patriarch. And oftentimes, I think it's kind of a mixture of all of the above. But yes, if I am a worker, I think mostly people are going to be gravitating to the leader of my organization.
Great, thank you, Dan. Also, there was another question about being able to make comparisons. So I know that we include national comparisons, but there was a question about being able to make comparisons with the custom questions.
I'm working on that. With some of those questions, I kind of noted some anecdotal comparisons along the way, like the percent with healthy food in the home or restaurant or workplace. With others, I don't, but I'm going to try and get at least some of those on our next. The well-being index right now goes every quarter. The next one's coming up next month, and I'm going to try and get at least some of those onto the survey platform. All of them, if I think I can get away with it. And then, then we'll have some national estimates for external benchmarking at our disposal. So stay tuned on that one.
Great. Okay, and then one more question from the Q&A. There was a question about whether the WBI considers racism or discrimination in people's sense of belonging.
Well, we don't measure it explicitly. Those things are, bad for well-being for obvious reasons. And we do take a look at well-being and equality, where you look at high well-being folks and low well-being folks inside of the same community, state, or nation. High well-being inequality is related to perceptions of racism and inequality generally inside the workplace, also related to a lot of different outcomes, including economic activity, GDP, when you get up to the national level. We do know that this instrument is pretty sensitive to these kind of things. Quick anecdote: when we went back to the spring of 2020 and COVID-19 first hit, we had a very sharp national rise in the percentage of people reporting a lot of stress the day before and a lot of worry the day before. In fact, those two metrics jumped 14 and 21 points respectively, which was eye-popping because they're real stable over time. And the previous time that we saw those things rise like that was in late 2008 during the Great Recession. And then they went up about 4 to 5 percentage points. So COVID-19 really redefined in my mind what was even capable from those two metrics in terms of movement to large population levels, US. When that happened, there's other emotions. Anger and sadness are a couple that we're also tracking. Anger and sadness didn't really change all that much when the pandemic arrived, the economy shut down, and we all remember what happened. People got sent home, social mitigation policies, etc., wearing masks, etc. But then something else happened. Something else happened, picking up in late May and running through most of the month of June, and that was George Floyd. That was the national protest. Black Lives Matter, of course, really became prominent in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. You had all the protests going on. Everybody remembers all that. It was a weird time for all that to be happening because there was a pandemic. I was like watching the screen, the protesters, put your mask on, please. I get why you're protesting, put on a mask. But when you moved into that late March, and Gallup was doing a lot of measurement this time, so we could be pretty precise with our measurement, with our estimates. When you get in that first half of June, sadness and anger shoot way up in ways that they hadn't from the pandemic. Stress and worry remained high, but didn't really change. But the anger and the sadness were both had significant increases, over 10 percentage points nationally. And then by the end of June, Mr. Floyd had been put to rest. He had his final memorial. Not all, but most of the protests simmered down and kind of ended. And then anger and sadness came right back down again, while stress and worry remained elevated. So it was a fascinating experiment in social sciences to see how if you change what's going on in the world, you can change. You have different metrics that are being moved around by. And that's a good example of how issues pertaining to racism can have a real detrimental effect on well-being, at least in the short term, and where it's, where it's a chronic situation where this is just the way it is around here. This is what we experience around here. Sure, that's certainly going to be harmful to well-being overall.
Great, thank you, Dan. And one more question, and maybe you can help me understand this one. It says, not needed today, but it would be good to see the response stats individually as a % against the population total of each community.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure I understand that. Are we asking for the response rate for each one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get that. I don't have that at my fingertips. We can get that.
Yeah, I think it might be for each question, like what is the frequency or the response rate for each one?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, we've our partners with the Blue Zones Project have the crosstabs that'll give you the estimates across each response category for every single question. Obviously, we don't pass along individual data because we're protecting the confidentiality of those who respond. But the summarized data, the group level data, that we've got, that can be shared.
So that's not what Anne Marie was trying to get across, but for some reason she can't unmute.
Okay.
So I don't know, Anne Marie, do you want to type what you were trying to get across to us? If you can't unmute, Nicole, can you let her allow her to unmute? Is there somebody with control who can allow her to unmute?
She's saying it's related to her first question, which is going back. She said her first question was, I remember seeing the statistics which illustrated the overall percent and number and percent of people who participated in the survey, but we don't have those totals sliced by each of the 3 community samples. So my understanding then is, Anne Marie, you're interested in seeing the percent against the total community for the sample size?
Yeah, that sounds to me like we're just looking for the response rate for each of our reportable areas. We can get that. I don't have it at my fingertips, but we can get that.
Anne Marie, you are unmuted if there were anything else to clarify there. Okay, we'll assume we're okay here.
Great, those are all the questions in the Q&A.
Super good questions, by the way, every single one of them. So thank you, everybody, for joining, hanging in here. Really excited to see what you all get accomplished as far as moving the needle in the years to come.
Thanks, Dan. I also want to acknowledge that Tiara dropped a survey in the chat that also has a section for additional follow-up questions. So if there is anything that comes through later that crosses your brain, please feel free to drop it in there and let us know. This meeting is also being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel within the next 10 days so that this webinar will be accessible to all that want to revisit it. Okay.
Well, it looks like we have one more question. If we have just another minute, can the data be disaggregated by race, gender, age, in addition to geography?
Yes. Now, and we have done so. We've done so for each community. Those get we start running into some sample size issues when we're going down into those subgroups. And for external reporting, we always require at least 150 cases to do so. That being said, we have summarized the data with subgroups across the Jacksonville overall total, as well as each of those 4 groups, our 3 focus communities, and then the remainder of Jacksonville. That's been
Thanks, Dan. And just also, I did drop in the chat that this is our initial data. Gallup will be with Blue Zones Project Jacksonville throughout the duration of our project. So we will be surveying year over year over year to collect more data and to have more information. I know that it is a snapshot of the opportunity, but we know that as we are in community more and have more opportunities to connect and learn and hear, that we will have more data and a better understanding of the makeup and the geography of what's showing up in our communities. So thank you so much, Dan, for being here and sharing this information with us. I just quickly wanted to re-thank our sponsors again. Again, this project we need them to do this work. So again, thank you, Baptist Health, Brooks Rehabilitation, City of Jacksonville, Community First Credit Union, Florida Blue, Jacksonville Jaguars, Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, Mayo Clinic, UF Health, and United Way. And I just also wanted to take a moment to introduce our incredible leadership team that will be working day in and day out to ensure success and to better the data that you saw on the screen today throughout our 5 years. This is our leadership team, but we also have incredible coordinators that are also supporting this work as well that you'll see on the call. This will be our full-time job to work together to move the needle forward in well-being outcomes. We will also be having our Blue Zones Project kickoff, which is a free community well-being event on June 3rd at the fairgrounds from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. There will be food trucks, giveaways, prizes. We'll discuss what Blue Zones Project is looking forward towards the future and our plans. It is free, it is open to the public, and we're just really looking forward to ensuring that our community has an opportunity to connect and to have a good time with each other. So we are looking for people to RSVP to come, volunteers. If you know someone that would want to be a vendor or take an opportunity to be a part of this performance or the live performances and demonstrations, we'd be more than happy to have you and have them. So just wanted to give you an opportunity to see what we're up to next. And we will continue to be up to incredible things. And we hope that you'll be along for the ride with us. In that chat that Tiara also dropped, there is a link, there is a question about being more involved in Blue Zones. So please, if you or your organization is looking to dive deeper into this work and being with Blue Zones Project and what we're up to, we'd be more than happy to connect and move forward. So I'll just ask Tiara to drop that link one more time. I know there was a quick hiccup, so just to ensure that you all have it. And we are looking forward to doing some really great work over the next 5 years. All right, I think if there's nothing else, just a big thank you to Gallup and the team, Dan Withers, Dan Foy, Micheline. Big thank you to our national Blue Zones team, Seth, Debbie, Amelia, Dawn. It's just been incredible to do this work, and I can't wait to continue to get started and dive deeper. Like we said, this has been recorded and it will be live on our YouTube within the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to being in community with you. Thank you all and be well.